Good afternoon. Let's start off by acknowledging today that I'm gathered here today on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt Nation. I'm joined today with Premier John Horgan, MLA Brittny Anderson. As well, we have two guests who will be logging in virtually today, Isha Achari and Jared Davis, who will be joining us and sharing some of their experiences. Looking forward to hearing from them. This pandemic has been very difficult for people, for businesses, and communities. Vaccines are coming, but we know that a healthy BC and a healthy economy go hand in hand. Cases are currently high, but we will get through this. We all need to do what we can to bend the curve. One demographic that has been particularly hit hard and challenged is our youth and our young adults. At the height of the pandemic, we saw unemployment rates at around 29%. Now, we're fortunate in March, we were able to see those numbers go significantly down to 12.1% unemployment, but that's still significantly higher than the average population, which is 6.9%. Youth were disproportionately impacted, and Premier John Horgan asked me to work with my colleagues to help address this important challenge. So now I'd like to invite Premier John Horgan.
Thank you, Ravi, and it's good to be here today on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people. I want to thank MLA Brittny Anderson for being here today, as well as Jared and Isha, who will be telling their stories about a program, an exciting new program that we're going to be announcing today. As Ravi said, young people have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Rites of passage like graduations, that first job, going to university with a group of people from your peer group, celebrating and exploring the wonders of young adulthood as we prepare for the challenges ahead. A year of travel, any number of things that I remember as a youth has been taken away because of COVID-19 from young people here in British Columbia. And although we have been focused for the past year and a bit on keeping all British Columbians safe and ensuring that we could keep as many livelihoods going as possible during extremely challenging times, we have seen, as Ravi said, a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable populations in our society, whether it's the elderly with respect to those in long-term care facilities or young people starting out their lives in the midst of a global pandemic. And although I did say to the graduating class of 2020 at Edward Milne Secondary in my community of Souk, saying you were going to be the only class to graduate during a pandemic is now going to be the second class to graduate during a pandemic. And we're hopeful that the vaccine rollout and the measures that have been put in place to protect people will be successful, and this will be the last summer of COVID-19. But as we keep people safe and keep our economy going, government has to be quick and responsive to the changing needs of people, not just young people, but all British Columbians. And I want to do two things today. Firstly, I want to announce that I've asked Brittny Anderson, the MLA for Nelson-Creston, to be the Premier's advisor on youth. That means Brittny will be able to go across the province, engaging with young people, bringing back their hopes, their concerns, their fears, so that government can put in place policies that will assist them in the short term, the medium term, and in the long term. I'm very fortunate as a leader of a government to have 7 members of my caucus who are millennials, the youngest of which is Brittny. But we have young people at our table that are bringing these issues forward day after day, week after week, month after month. And part of that process has led to the programs that Ravi and I are going to be announcing today. Before we get to that, I want to thank Brittny for stepping up. This is an ominous responsibility. To be my advisor on youth issues means that her email and her texts are going to be filled with people that have good ideas, and we want to encourage that. Everybody has a role to play in British Columbia. Everybody has a part in coming out of the pandemic, and I'm very excited to have Brittny taking up this challenge and doing what she can to make sure that we lift up young people right across BC. I also want to spend some time talking a little bit about the programs that we're announcing today. The Stronger BC Future Leaders Program are 5 distinct programs totaling about $45 million that will fund jobs, they will fund internships and co-op opportunities across British Columbia. 5,000 young people will benefit from these programs. getting work experience, that first opportunity to move up and move on with their lives as we say goodbye to COVID-19 in the months ahead. The programs are especially focused on assisting young people to get the experience that they need to move on to other more promising jobs in the marketplace. I remember as a youth, I remember my children coming out of high school and then out of university. The biggest challenge young people have is getting that experience they need to put on a resume to make the case to a business or to an organization that they have something to contribute. And I believe this program will assist literally 5,000 young people in achieving that very important goal of getting that first bit of practical in the workplace experience that can lead to better paying jobs, stronger careers, and a focus on the things that people want to do in their work life. These positions, of course, will promote innovation and sustainability. Young people will earn an income while they're gaining experience, and all young people are being asked to participate if they can. I know we're going to hear from Jared and Isha in a minute, but before I do that, I want to ask Brittny to say a few words about how she's going to take on this new challenge that I've given to her as the Premier's advisor on youth issues. Over to you, Brittny.
Thank you. It is an honor to serve as the Premier's special advisor on youth. As you note, the youth of this province have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic. I look forward to working with BC's young people in overcoming today's challenges. Young people want good jobs, a good education, and affordable housing. Working with youth-led and youth-serving organizations across British Columbia, we will develop strategies to support the employment of young people. A good job today benefits young people for years to come. I'll ensure we have participation from Indigenous and racialized youth, and from those living in rural and remote communities. It is essential we have participation from youth who all too often have not had their voices heard. We know young people are feeling the effects of the current health emergency, and as we look to equitable and just recovery, their voices cannot and will not be left out of the conversation. I look forward to hearing from the youth of our province. I know the future is bright, and it will be all the brighter with their full participation. Thank you so much, Premier.
That's great news. Thank you, Premier John Horgan. Of course, thank you, Brittny. I know you're going to do a fantastic job in this role, and you've already been doing an amazing job advocating for your community, but as well for young people. Look forward to working with you on the initiatives ahead. Now I'd like to introduce Jared Davis to speak about and share his experience with the Youth Employment Program. So I know he's joining us virtually. So Jared, over to you.
Thank you, Minister Kahlon. So I'd just like to share my personal story. I graduated from university in 2020 April with a degree in Native Studies. From there, I moved to Northern BC to reconnect with my family. I was able to move to Fort St. John area. A family member of mine shared the youth employment program job posting to me. I applied and then I got the job. And the benefits of the program helped me immensely. I was able to get familiar with the land, the wildlife, also with, it got me familiar with what wildlife conservation means. It also has allowed me to reconnect with my heritage in a way that I couldn't really imagine before. So I really appreciate that. It's allowed me to strengthen the ties with Indigenous people, Indigenous nations, with the Conservation Officer Service, and overall has allowed me to develop personal and professional skills. And I am looking forward to the opportunities that this will open up for me in the future. And yeah, basically, I'm very excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared, and I really appreciate your words, and it's very inspiring. So I know the future is bright for you. So thank you for your comments. Now I'd like to introduce Isha Achari. who will talk about her experience with the youth employment program with BC Parks last November. And I understand she recently moved into a recreation and policy analyst job within the BC Public Service after your work experience. So looking forward to hearing that. And I'll pass the mic over virtually to Isha. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to share my experience as an intern with the BC Public Service through the Youth Employment Program, which is similar to the program being announced today. When I joined the BC Parks YEP program, I had recently graduated with my master's specializing in energy and natural resources law, and I was interested in gaining policy experience in the natural resource sector. I was placed in recreation services where I assisted my supervisor on a variety of exciting permit policy and guideline research, which allowed me to apply practical and analytical skills from my degree. My supervisor has been extremely supportive of my career development from the first day of the internship, and I've worked with her to identify goals, build skills that align with those goals, undertake relevant professional development courses, and take on interesting and challenging projects. I was so impressed with how well the YEP program was run, especially considering the unique challenges of operating an internship program virtually this year. The staff involved went above and beyond in integrating us into the BC Parks environment, introducing us to staff in different program areas, incorporating us into the workplace culture, and supporting us in identifying and working toward longer-term career goals. Because of the subject matter knowledge I gained during my internship, I was lucky enough to step into a temporary permit policy analyst position, which has given me the opportunity to continue learning and growing in a very encouraging environment surrounded by inspiring people. I'm so grateful to be a participant and for the mentorship I've received. I know this will be a valuable foundation for the next chapter. I can absolutely vouch for youth employment opportunities in the BC Public Service, and I strongly encourage people to take a look at the new program being announced today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Isha, for sharing your experience, and of course, wish you best of luck in the opportunity that you have now, as well as future career opportunities within the public service. A Stronger BC Future Leaders Program is an investment in our young people. It's an opportunity to tackle climate change. It's an opportunity and an investment in the future for our future leaders in innovation. Working alongside my colleagues in the Ministry of Flinro, Environment, and Advanced Education, we will ensure that we're providing support to our youth, helping them get a broad range of skills that meet future needs and help us build a stronger BC. I want to highlight that many of the programs that we're offering today are target particularly women, Indigenous, and Black youth. Very proud about that. I'm also very excited to see the program in action and want to thank all the public servants who have worked very hard to make these programs available. I'd also want to highlight that many of you may have known that the Circuit Breaker Business Grant Relief Program website launched this morning. We have seen a big uptake in applications. In fact, we had over 100 businesses apply within the first half an hour of the application being open. So promising sign, and we encourage businesses to apply. Businesses can apply today at www.gov.bc.ca/business relief. With that, I will pass the mic over to the moderators for the Q&A.
Thank you, Minister. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up only. First question today is from Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Oh, hi, Premier. We're more than 2/3 of the way through the circuit breaker, and BC's caseload really hasn't budged. What are the chances we'll see an extension or perhaps even stricter restrictions come once that deadline is up?
Thank you, Tanya, for the question. And we are, of course, very troubled by the case count over the past 10 days. Dr. Henry will be doing a briefing and some modeling on Thursday that will give us a better sense of where we are in terms of the 7-day rolling average. But I am confident as of today, 25% of eligible British Columbians have received a first dose of vaccine. And we keep focusing on making sure that that supply that is made available by the federal government gets into the arms of British Columbians. Having said that, we're trying to play catch-up in a couple of situations, and I give full credit to public health as well as Dr. Ballum, who's in charge of the immunization program, to be flexible enough to pivot when we need to, moving away from our age cohorts and focusing on areas where there have been outbreaks, areas where we can stem the increase of the case count. And we've been using all of those tools, as well as the circuit breaker public health orders that were put in place to protect British Columbians, to protect businesses for the long term. We'll see what the data shows us on Thursday. Cabinet meets tomorrow to review a host of other initiatives, so it's premature for me to comment, other than to say encouraging people to follow the orders, stay safe, physically distant, stay away from people you don't know, and for goodness sakes, let's all focus on getting through this.
Tanya, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. You've been resistant to bring in stricter and enforceable travel restrictions within BC. So if the situation continues to worsen and you're still not going to go that route, I mean, what other measures are on the table, or what other measures are you at least considering at this point?
Well, thank you. We haven't taken travel restrictions off the board, quite frankly. It's about how practical are they and how can we enforce. You will know that already here in British Columbia and indeed across the country, but here in BC, 106 travelers have tried to circumvent the federal quarantine rules that are governed by our border services agencies that have dedicated locations to engage with people when they're coming into Canada. And despite that, you've had 106 people who've tried in BC that have tried to circumvent that. So there are logistical challenges which we've talked about over the past number of months. But I did have a phone call, a bilateral discussion with Premier Kenney yesterday on a range of issues. Among those were the concerns we both share mutually about people that come back and forth between Alberta and British Columbia, whether it be on essential travel or non-essential travel, and the consequences that's having on case counts in our respective jurisdictions. So we have not taken anything off the table, but practicality is first and foremost in our mind. What can we usefully do to protect people is always there. And we, as I say, Cabinet meets tomorrow. All of these issues will be on the table.
Next question is from Richard Zisman, Global News.
Premier, with the WorkSafe policy now in place that could close down businesses, what support is your government going to put in place for those workers who can't go to work? They don't qualify for the federal sick day program. You promised a provincial sick day program that would fill in gaps. We still don't have that. So what are you going to do to help these workers that don't qualify if they're forced to remain home? Also, overall, those workers that are forced to remain home because they are worried that they may have COVID or have shown symptoms that haven't specifically been asked to isolate. So therefore, again, don't qualify.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Richard. There's a whole host of different categories in that question, so it's challenging for me to give you a direct answer. But I have been in touch with Minister Freeland, the federal finance minister, talking about the CERB program, which is still in place to help workers that are displaced because of COVID-19. And of course, circuit breaker is a good example of that. So those workers are eligible for CERB. For those who are staying home because they feel that they may be putting their colleagues at risk, I applaud them. And there is a federal program in place. We will have budgets on the 19th and 20th, one federal, one provincial, where we hope to see new programs to make sure that we're meeting that challenge. But it's important that we continue to raise these issues. Workers, businesses, public servants, and of course, elected representatives with other orders of government to make sure that we clearly understand how important it is to give people the protections that they can make the right public health choices without compromising their economic viability with their families and in their community. So, critically important issue. I believe there are appropriate programs in place. And as we look at the last number of months of COVID-19, I'm confident that we're on the right track. But if we need to amend, we have two budgets ahead of us, and then the rollout of those documents into May.
Follow-up, Richard?
So let me be super specific then. I'm sorry I was too broad there. So WorkSafeBC closes down a business because of an exposure. There's somebody there who has not tested positive for COVID or been asked to isolate. Either they weren't at work. What support does someone like that receive considering they don't qualify for any programs that exist?
As I understand it, those workers will be eligible for CERB based on conversations I had with the federal finance minister late last week. If as a result of the circuit breaker, or if as a result of an outbreak in an industry within British Columbia, if workers are said that they need to go home, they are immediately eligible for the CERB program, and they should be kept whole that way. I was trying to respond to the specific paid sick leave issue, which continues to be one that's in flux. The federal government took the leadership on that. They haven't delivered the program that many in the workplace had envisioned. And again, I raised those issues with the federal finance minister, and they're going to continue to make sure that they refine those programs so that people can feel safe economically and with respect to their personal health.
Next question is from Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
You just spoke about your concerns with people coming in and refusing the mandatory quarantine rules. So what can BC do to work with the federal government if, the process that it's set up is not working? What can BC do to try and work with the federal government to make sure that people are following the rules, or that these COVID-infected passengers are not coming into BC?
Well, it's not certain that the 106 individuals who tried to circumvent the quarantine rules were infected. But what I can tell you is that local law enforcement, through public safety, whether they be RCMP or municipal forces, have issued significant fines to those individuals, far in excess of what the cost of 3 days in a hotel would be. So we're working with the federal government on enforcement. Again, when you have regulated borders, as we do internationally, and still people are trying to find ways to circumvent their responsibility to keep themselves and everyone else safe, the response has to be a hefty fine, and that's what's happened in this case.
Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. You'd mentioned that travel restrictions are not off the table, but this has been something that has been asked by yourself and asked of the province over and over, considering Manitoba and the Atlantic provinces have, their own little bubble. So is this something that the province is reconsidering, given the rise of the variants? You just mentioned your talk with Premier Kenney. So what is on the table then in terms of provincial travel restrictions?
Well, again, we did significant work on this over the past number of months, and we're listening to advice from public health officials. We're taking that advice. We're following the science. And if Dr. Henry believes that there's an opportunity for us to use some form of border restrictions, we'll look at that. The notion of what they call having people stay closer to home. Those are the issues that we've been talking about for months and months and months. And we're going to continue talking about that until we can get past the 25% dosage of vaccines that we have into people's arms. The notion of having a curfew is something that's not necessarily being particularly effective in Quebec. Some of the harsher restrictions in Ontario have not seen a decline in the case counts there. We are at a new phase of the COVID crisis. And our approach has been always to be nimble, to be focused on what we can do to keep people safe, what we can do to protect individuals, communities, and businesses. And that's exactly what we'll do. But it requires all of us working together. And on balance, I have to say that after what has been 14 extremely difficult months for British Columbians and Canadians, we're doing pretty good. That does not mean that we let down our guard at this point, far from it. And we're going to continue to look at ways to protect people, just as we're looking ways to find programs that can lift people up, as we've announced here today.
Mary Griffin, Check News.
Premier, I just wanted your reaction. Yesterday, the Pashidat First Nation issued a statement regarding what's going on in Fairy Creek watershed with the blockades, which is in your backyard in your riding. And I'm just wondering what your reaction is to the people who are continuing to block access into the watershed, denying the loggers' work. They don't appear to be backing down, and they continue to raise money, thousands of dollars, since that statement came out yesterday.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And the Pacheedaht Nation is within my provincial electoral area. I have known the Pacheedaht people not just as an elected representative, but for many years before that. I am friends, I would say, with the vast majority of the people on reserve. I've worked with them as an opposition member and as the Premier of British Columbia to try and advance the issues of the people of the Pacheedaht territory, and I'll continue to do that. I was grateful to see both Hereditary Chief Quisto Jones and elected Chief Jeff Jones speak quite forcefully to people who are creating dissent within their community, saying that they would prefer that they be left alone to manage these issues in the interest of the people of the territory. I think that's an appropriate request by the people who have rights and title. And if there are those who claim that they are standing up for Indigenous rights, they're certainly not doing that if they're disregarding the requests of not just the elected, but the hereditary leadership as well. These are very polarizing issues. I understand that. They take time to resolve, and the Pacheedaht have asked for time to have their own internal discussions about how they use the land that has been theirs for time immemorial. I think that people should respect that. If it disrupts their fundraising, I will not apologize for that. I think they should respect the will of the rights and title holders in the territory.
Mary, do you have a follow-up?
I do. It just seems we've had crews up there many times talking to people at the various blockades, and they seem to be dug in. You know, they've raised almost $300,000 in their GoFundMe. Is there any consideration to the province intervening to try to talk them down? Because it seems that they're settling in for a long haul at these blockades.
Well, again, the people, they can speak for themselves, Mary. I can't, certainly. I know that the rights and title holders in the territory have asked them to move along and allow the people in the community to peacefully figure out where they want to go on their territory. We're in final stage of treaty negotiations with the Pacheedaht, as well as a host of other arrangements they have with people in their territory to live in harmony, to protect the biodiversity that is, of course, their heritage and all of our collective heritage. And I think that people should respect that. If fundraising is more important than the rights and titles of Indigenous people, then that's for those individuals to explain on their GoFundMe pages.
Next question is from Binder Sajjan, CTV.
Premier, just wanted to ask you, this morning the Public Health Agency announced that there was a case of a rare blood clot due to AstraZeneca in Canada, and at the same time, the U.S. is pausing the Johnson & Johnson for similar issues. I'm just wondering, how worried are you about vaccine hesitancy given these issues?
Well, thank you for the question. And I've not been briefed on the Canadian case. I'm aware of it. I know I'll get a further briefing from Dr. Henry and Minister Dix later this afternoon at our regular briefings. And then, of course, as I've said a couple of times, Cabinet meets tomorrow to have that discussion. With respect to AstraZeneca, the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations has not yet rendered a decision on whether it's appropriate to continue using that product in Canada and under what circumstances that would happen. I'll await for that advice from Dr. Tam, which of course gets input from not just Dr. Henry, but from health officials across the country. With respect to the Johnson & Johnson, there is no Johnson & Johnson available in Canada at the moment, and I have not heard from the Prime Minister that that's high on the list of places to focus. We are grateful that the Pfizer vaccine is becoming in regular amounts. That's allowed us to plan not just for our age cohorts, which is going very, very well, but also to pivot and to use vaccines as a tool to reduce outbreaks, whether it be immunizing frontline workers, as we're doing in Surrey today with police and fire, bus drivers as well, and other parts of the Lower Mainland, or focusing on community outbreaks like Whistler and earlier Prince Rupert. The vaccine is a valuable tool for public health officials, but the first tool is for everybody to follow the orders that are already in place. And I believe that we'll continue to work hard with the vaccines that are available to us, and we'll take advice from the national body on what to do with AstraZeneca. The hesitancy question, quite frankly, hasn't appeared. As we've received AstraZeneca, it's disappeared into the arms of British Columbians, and I suspect that will continue. The advice that I've been given today, which may change, but the advice I've been given today is that you should take the first vaccine that's offered to you because it's in the interest of not just yourself, but your neighbors, your family, and your community.
Next question is from Lisa Houston, News 1130.
Well, hello.
Sorry, Binder. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, Binder. Go ahead.
It's my fault.
Premier, speaking of Dr. Tam, she actually got a vaccine dose today. And I'm wondering, not to out you on your age or anything, but I believe you are eligible for the AstraZeneca in pharmacies. Have you received your shot yet? If not, why not? Would you consider doing that in front of people to show them that you have confidence in AstraZeneca? And do you think it would be worthwhile to have other high-profile British Columbians also join in?
Well, thank you for that. I have not yet been vaccinated. I did take advantage of the online tool, and my spouse and I registered for our age cohort, which has not yet been called, I'll say. Has not yet been called, I'll repeat. And it took 2 minutes to do the two of us. So I had been staying in that stream, but I have been discussing with my colleagues whether or not it would be a good idea for me to get an AstraZeneca vaccine. I know my colleague in Ontario, Premier Ford, has done that. I would have no hesitation whatsoever. I was more inclined to wait my turn, but if there was a value in me getting the shot based on advice from Dr. Henry, advice from the National Committee, I would do that in a minute.
Next question is from Lisa Houston, News 1130.
Hi, Premier. And it may seem like a repeated question, but just people were getting a lot of questions, I'm sure you are too, about confusion about what's okay and what's not. We're told that we can gather in groups of 10, but then Dr. Henry said yesterday, try not to do that. So I'm wondering, is enough enforcement being done? Is the province doing everything possible that can be done to encourage people, to tell people to stay home? Are we being specific enough? Is the message getting everywhere it needs to go for those who aren't on these calls every day, who aren't listening to all this information firsthand?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lisa, for that question. And it's a difficult one to answer because we have been talking, me to you and Dr. Henry and Minister Dix and other of my colleagues and indeed leaders from across the country have been talking about how people should act for over a year. And I understand completely how frustrating that is for folks who have done their part and they've stayed home and they've not seen their kids. They've not visited their grandparents. They've not traveled to funerals to bury their loved ones. They've done all of the things that have been asked of them. And despite that, they see examples of people who are just completely disregarding all of the work that they have done. And it's not about disregarding the government for most people. It's about, hey, man, I'm doing my part. Why aren't you? And governments can do so much. The reality is the public has to be there. The vast majority are. And when there are egregious examples of people disregarding the orders, there have been consequences, whether it be the loss of a business license for a restaurant that decided that they were smarter than public health officials and wanted to not follow the lead of their association, their umbrella association, and other people in the hospitality sector. There were significant consequences. If you're not going to follow orders with respect to the number of people indoors, if you're going to have a party in your penthouse condominium, there are going to be consequences. So I believe we have had enough carrot and enough stick for those who are paying attention. For those who are not, it's a bigger challenge. And there's no sugarcoating I can do, quite frankly, to your question. My appeal is the same as it has been for over a year. Please, British Columbians, in the interest of not just yourselves, but all of those around you, follow the rules. Dr. Henry will have more to say on Thursday as we look at more data. And I believe, I'm very confident that the vast majority of British Columbians are behind this 100%. They want to say goodbye to COVID. They want the young people that we're highlighting today to have the types of jobs and careers that we aspired to when we were young people. I used to wait on tables. I know the challenges of that. I know the challenges that young people have every single day in a normal year. But during a global pandemic, it has been disproportionately on their shoulders. And we need to change that. And that means all of us working together.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
It's sort of in the same vein and sort of a bit about enforcement. People are being asked to stay in their own community. Some have questions about what exactly is my community. Also, people have reservations on weekends for hotels, for houseboats, for campgrounds. Is it time for the province to say you cannot make a booking if it's not in your community? You cannot book a campground. Like, it's not time for the province to be more stringent about what cannot be done.
Well, we have had discussions about that. We'll continue to have discussions about that tomorrow's cabinet, and this will come up again. There were suggestions that MLA should reach out to the B&B sector in their community and say, don't do any more bookings. And many are not. I heard a story of a restaurant that was entitled to open prior to the circuit breaker, shutting down because everyone in the restaurant was from somewhere else, and they knew that because it was a small community. So again, I think people are acting. The people that are listening, the people that are paying attention, the people that want to be part of the solution are acting. And again, we will use the tools that are available to us if we believe that they will be effective. But effective deployment of these rules is the challenge, and we've been talking about that for a year as well.
Next question is from Jason Huey, Fairchild.
Hi, Premier. Thank you for taking my question. We have a source showing that workers at Vancouver Coastal Health Accounting and IT Department have already got vaccinated. And with the shortage of the vaccine we're facing right now, many frontline workers, like all CBSA border service officers, police, and firefighters, are not vaccinated yet. So we wonder why these non-frontline workers at BCH can get vaccinated before those who really work at the front lines, such as the CBSA officer. Are you aware of this kind of incident happening in CCH, and what is your response on that?
I'm not aware of the specific issue that you're referring to, but I can tell you that I've received countless letters, correspondence from organizations across British Columbia, indeed across Canada, who believe that their organization, the members of their organization, should be vaccinated before anyone else. And almost every single one of those arguments are valid, legitimate arguments that would persuade me were we swimming in supply, but we're not. And so those decisions are being made by public health officials, not by politicians, and that's as it should be. When we have a scarcity of supply and extraordinary demand, the best way to deploy that resource is by listening to the directions of public health officials and making sure we're using every drop of vaccine to its highest best purpose. And until we see a surplus of vaccine in British Columbia, which does not appear to be on the horizon, we're going to be responding based on the best advice we get from public health officials.
Jason, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. And we noticed that CBSA, the border service officer, are not on the list of frontline workers for the vaccination. Are they not considered as frontline workers, or is there a schedule for them to get their vaccination?
Well, again, I'll go back to Terry, to my initial answer. Those decisions are being made by public health officials based on the supply that we have. We had an ambitious plan when AstraZeneca was coming in large amounts, when Moderna was coming in regular amount. The only vaccine that's arriving as advertised is the Pfizer vaccine. It's more volatile to deal with. It needs colder temperatures for storage. So it's the more challenging of all of them, but it's been the most consistent. And Dr. Penny Ballum, who's overseeing the immunization program, has been making science-based medical decisions on how best to deploy that. And if CB border officials have not yet been vaccinated, they're federal employees. That doesn't mean that they're any lesser British Columbians, but they're federal employees. And if the federal government has a plan for the borders and those critical workers, then they should speak to that.
That's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. And to Isha and Jared, thank you very much for joining us today. Good luck with your careers. And to all the 5,000 people that will be able to access the programs that Minister Kahlon and I announced today, this is an opportunity to get that experience. This is an opportunity to dive in, whether it be on the tech side, whether it be helping remove derelict boats on the coast. This is an opportunity for summer employment and full-time employment as well. I encourage people to go online and get into the program. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, I lied.